Live.
Hold up. Amen.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for today's webinar. My name is Arnes Biogradlia, and I will be your host today. I'm a content director at energynews.biz, #1 website on green hydrogen on Google. Today, we are presenting Hydrail in Germany, From Hype to Reality, presented by Dr. Holger Busche. Holger is an expert in the field of sustainable transport and has been working on Hydrail technology for many years. He's a scientific advisor for energy and traffic at the provincial parliament in northern Germany and federal Bundestag. He described wind to hydrogen to rail and then became one of the most active and effective players in Hydrail, organizing Neumünster 2014 and Hamburg 2019 Hydrail conferences. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Please, if you have any questions during the presentation, type them into your live chat on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, or send them directly to info@energynews.biz. At the end of the presentation, I'll bring them up. Now, without any further ado, we will turn our time to Dr. Holger Busche. Holger, please take the stage.
Welcome, everybody. I just start sharing my screen, and I'm a 53-year-old geophysicist and coming up with the latest news on Hydrail. Here we go. So I'm from Hanover, which is also in the north of Germany, maybe well known by the Messe, the fair, where you have obviously exhibitions for the industry. I'm also engaged for the International Hydrail Conference, as Hans just explained, that I organized it 2014 and 2019 in northern Germany. I'm also in some voluntary organizations engaged as, for example, the Scientists for Future, which is a science group supporting Fridays for Future, of which everybody certainly will know. So I'm employed in the parliament in the province of Schleswig-Holstein, but this is not an official job in the moment. So I'm just doing personal statements and not a political statement of that fraction I'm working for. So that's a typical sentence that I have to say. So the thing is, I want to bring in the topics, why hydrogen and why trains with hydrogen. And the coming up question is it just a hope or a hype or history? Or can we start really into business? And that's what's going actually on in Frankfurt, which is in the middle of Germany. But there's also some kind of a competition in between different modes of tractions for trains, which you can certainly see later on. And so what is it in Germany and what is it in different places of the world? That might be the interesting story, and I'm joining the discussion later on. So the vision is very old to use hydrogen, just like everybody knows, maybe Jules Verne water will one day be employed as fuel, and so on and so on and so on. Everybody can read this. And the magic is, if you have solar and wind energy, you have a clean source and a very cheap source to produce hydrogen. I just showed here up here the area of northern Germany, which is Schleswig-Holstein here up to the river. Here's Hamburg, you may be known. And if you see in this area, there are about 2.8 million people living, so 1.5 million cars in operation. And if you want to power all these cars with hydrogen, you need about, in northern Germany, a size of this square here of solar modules to power enough electrolyzers to produce the hydrogen for those cars. So you see, that's not that much. So solar and wind are certainly powerful enough to power all that, if we would use them in extent that we need. Schleswig-Holstein is also quite very windy, so especially the west coast and a bit of part of the east coast is quite also windy. So there's heaps of energy which we are not using in the moment, but maybe in the future. So it's neither a question of technology nor of wind and solar availability. We have energy, as you can see the amount that's needed. And if you see a very, very old publication of in the 80s for hydrogen buses, hydrogen was always thought into cars, buses, and even rockets flying with hydrogen. But the idea of having trains operated with hydrogen is not that old, but we're coming to this a little bit later on. It's not only the availability that makes it interesting to use renewable energies, because it's also the pricing. If you see in this graphic here, you see the amount of modules that has been delivered and installed, and you see the pricing. You see it's going down, 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 down. The more power you have in solar energy, the less the price is going to be. So we're talking about something like 4 to 5 cents per kilowatt hour, and you need about 50 to 55 kilowatt hours per kilogram of hydrogen. At the end of the day, if you have a fuel cell or something similar, you're ending up with getting 15 kilowatt hours out of a kilogram of hydrogen. So you're scaling up, and you will find out that these pricing is quite interesting. And especially if you look at these cost of solar energy is even cheaper now than coal power stations, if you include the carbon taxes. So there's no way around renewable energies. And the most important thing is about hydrogen. Hydrogen can be produced at any time when you have too much electricity in the grid, very cheap. And hydrogen technology is established since more than 100 years already. So my grandmother was cooking with hydrogen actually in Hamburg, because it was a waste gas that was introduced into the gas lines for the city. So actually she was cooking with hydrogen, and she wasn't really a hydrogen expert. So that's fine. The technology is established, it's handleable, and it can be stored for different, used for different sources. So mostly in our days, still it's natural gas coming that gets split off. Natural gas is usually methane, so carbon, hydrogen, 1C and 4 hydrogen atoms, and so they get split up. But this also produces carbon dioxide, which we actually don't want to have in the atmosphere anymore. So the visions and basic for hydrogen sounds good at first and motivates, because if you see in the upper map on the right side, you see the different kind of electrifications in Europe, and you see it's just a mess. Germany can be happy to have just one kind of electricity, but look at France, which is a totally mixture in between different kind of electrifications in the catenary system of the railways. So if you have a train that operates from Amsterdam to Spain, for example, you will have different kind of electrifications. And the idea was originally, can we overcome this by just using hydrogen? And if you look at the percentage of electrifications on the railway network in Germany, here in red, is about 60%. Only Switzerland has got 100% of electrified lines. Everybody else is below that. And in Germany, as one of the largest countries, is just somewhere at the range of 60, which is not really that much in comparison to all the other countries that you can see on the right side. But at the end of the day, if the trains could be operated without catenary systems, it would ease operation in a substantial manner. We see this in Northern Americas, like Canada or New Zealand in other countries. But most of the tracks worldwide are not electrified at all. So there is the idea of having Hydrail and the hope that it will cope with a lot of problems we have in the railway systems worldwide. So my first publication seems to be also the first publication on Hydrail at all, unless the founder of the International Hydrail Conference just told me that he never found something that's older than 1998. If somebody finds something like this, then I will be happy to get that one. But I just did an examination for a certain railway line in northern Germany, which is in between the two largest cities in between Kiel and Lübeck, which is this line about 80 kilometers long, which is equivalent to about 50 miles. I just calculated for this line how many renewable energies would be needed. So it's just one power station at that time. How much would be the economic benefit for this, and how many trains will you have, as developed a certain timetable for the railway operation, and so on and so on. And is it possible to make the e-trains wireless, so going faster, better, and cheaper in comparison to a catenary system at the time? And even at that days, for the very few operations, so 2-hour trains per hour in operation over there. At that days, it would be cheaper, even with those prices of fuel cells at the time, to operate with hydrogen rather than building the catenary systems. The thing on trains is, in comparison to cars, that you have a lot of advantages using hydrogen in a train, because the energy consumption of a train is much lower than of a car in comparison to their size. So that makes your technology being easier installed. The second thing is a car is just staying around more than 23 hours a day. So even if you install a quite expensive bit of technology into a car, and you just drive 40 kilometers a day, which is the average in Germany, of course, this is more expensive than if you install something in a train, which operates 600, 700, 800 kilometers a day, or even more than 1,000. So the scaling of the size of the vehicle is obviously in favor to trains, especially is also if you look at the fueling stations. I mean, you need, for the whole part of Schleswig-Holstein, you would need maybe 3 or 4 fueling stations, while we have hundreds of fueling stations for cars. So there's quite a lot of things that makes a Hydrail better than hydrogen cars. Of course, you need less energy. This is also a second thing. Trains are always better than cars regarding to the energy. The history. So actually, in the very beginning, I was starting up buying 2 old rail cars from the 50s, which have been operated by rechargeable batteries, and that one has been removed. So the batteries have been removed in the 90s in order to install a diesel engine. We wanted to have these 2 rail cars in some kind of a competition in between rechargeable batteries, of course, new ones. The older ones had been lead batteries, so very, very heavy, and hydrogen. So we started this in 2011 or 12. We got some first examinations and so on. I can show photos of these old rail cars, vintage rail cars. But nevertheless, 2013, 14, Alstom came up with the idea of changing one of their standard diesel rail cars, the Island. The Island 54. 54 stands for 54 meters of length. And they made up the project of having these ones converted to hydrogen. As you can see in the background here, a photo of those and the history. So it started in 2014-15, and they started to have a pre-series trains, 2 of them, also again 2, and started them on a passenger operation line, which is close to Hamburg, which is part of the International Hydrail Conference in 2019. So we had the start of the fleet operation, which was scheduled for end of last year. And now next to Frankfurt, they're having a fleet in operation. They are facing problems. I will talk about this a little later on. But nevertheless, Hydrail is on the run. And we can see the first generation of hydrogen railways, which is this Island. You see this is Lower Saxony. You have here in top on here about Hamburg, if you're looking on a map. And you see what they are expecting to do is having a range of 1,000 kilometers, refilling just taking 15 minutes. You see some technical data in here, which you can see later on also in the presentations it's given you. Of course, this is a hybrid, so they have a battery of 110 kilowatt hours installed to shape the peak power needs and demands. So not that the fuel cell has to cope with all these power changes in a short time, which usually fuel cells doesn't like that much. Nevertheless, so the homologation of the system was achieved. The train was in operation with a big opening and in schedule with live passengers also on that line. A little later on, Hydrail came up with the second generation, the Mireo, which is a standard train of Siemens. And Siemens is designing these trains on a basis of a standard electric rail car. So that's a difference. The Island is originally a diesel hydraulic rail car, so there's no electric propulsion system in the original version, while this one is usually powered with a catenary system, which gives you quite some advantages in the system because you have all the electric engine and so on already installed. Siemens developed both versions, so it's the B standing for battery or the rechargeable batteries, and the H is staying for hydrogen, of course. You see some more data in here. They're trying to cope with the same filling time, 15 minutes of refilling for hydrogen, and especially they are able to connect with the other trains of these kind of fleet. So if there's a catenary system train, that should be connectable to those hydrogen trains. So if you have a hydrogen line coming from a rural area, for example, getting closer to a metropolitan area where you have a catenary system, then you can just connect them and the people doesn't have to change. It's just to connect the catenary system to this. This brings up the question, when do we should be used a catenary system, a rechargeable battery, or Hydrail? And the decision will be done by CAPEX and OPEX, of course. Usually, it's all the money that makes the decisions, usually at the end of the day, on the long run, which is usually in railways quite decades of time. The catenaries are, of course, most powerful trains, but you have a high CAPEX. You have to invest a hell lot of money, which is in Germany, something like 2 million euros per kilometer to install an overhead catenary system. And in North America, it's even much more than this, as the trucks are larger and all that kinds of problems that you fear over there. These are good for large traffic volumes. So that's why you see these graphic in here. So the traffic volume goes on the y-axis up here. And you see everything from a certain traffic volume on, you always use catenary systems because it's the CAPEX is distributed over a lot of operation. And so the costs, the lower cost of operation will make the decision. But the interesting thing starts with the range. So if you have a range, if you have low range needed, because you only have at the end a line of 20 or 30 kilometers that you have to cope with, then you go for the rechargeable battery because you can use the catenary system on the main line, for example. But if you don't have this and you have to go with your train on a longer run, then Hydrail is coming into play. And also here, the decision is made by the range and, of course, by the money at the end of the day. You see certainly no diesel here anymore because, I mean, everybody knows the global climate crisis. Diesel will be no longer allowed, I say, 2040, 2045, beyond. So there's no chance to use diesel anymore as long as you're not deriving it from renewable energy, which is a hell lot of expensive process. And of course, you need these small amounts that will be available on these e-fuels for transportation systems that doesn't have any chance to get a different power system like ships on transatlantic ships or airplanes. They will always use and need liquid fuels. Trains won't need it. So the future will be somewhere in between the competition in between the batteries and the Hydrail. So it's based on this question: how many kilometers do you have in between your catenary systems, if you have some? And so the range is usually something around 80 kilometers. So you can fill up a gap in between the catenary systems of 80 kilometers or 40 kilometers return. The technology is also feasible. These kind of trains will be in operation in northern Germany, Schleswig-Holstein, starting this year also. So it's coming up. We will see the question, which is will be coming up more and more. And you see these a study of the Association of Electrical Engineers who evaluated the pricings of electrical trains, either Hydrail or rechargeable batteries. And you see, of course, the question, the sum of the investment and operational costs over a certain period of time for these evaluated tracks varies, of course, with the cost of the hydrogen. So if the cost of hydrogen, which is something like more or less today 10 euro per kilogram hydrogen, is coming down more and more, you will find out that you sooner or later will hit the line where it's cheaper than the diesel multiple unit. And the diesel is here given by 120 euros per liter, and we are far beyond this price. This is a few years old, this study, so we are facing already 150 or something like this. And even the 12 cents per kilowatt hour for the catenary system is no longer the price that you pay today. So it's going to be interesting where this race is coming up at the end of the day. So Hydrail chances in Germany are limited. This is due to the fact that 60% of the electrified of the railway network is electrified, so it doesn't make that much sense to have a Hydrail train in operation below a catenary system or underneath. But you see the yellow lines are here, those where the catenary system is not installed, and you see here Hamburg and the line that has been used for the Hydrail trains, and you see here Frankfurt where the lines are where the fleet of hydrogen trains are now in operation or get into operation. Hydrail facing a big problem, as hydrogen is not just an energy source that you can just withdraw from Earth, just like oil or coal. You have to produce it, and the capacity to do so is limited by the moment. So it won't be a problem 250 plus or so, but it's a problem now. And hydrogen will be urgently needed in different uses like the steel industry. So today, if you have the iron oxide to be reduced, you use usually coal, and that has to be replaced by hydrogen. And you can imagine that a steel factory needs a hell lot of hydrogen to produce their steel in a green way. The chemical industry, of course, everything that is made of plastic has some kind of hydrogen included. So, the question is how much hydrogen will be available in which area at which time. Interesting enough, the electricity pricing does not reflect the true value of electricity. So that's what I'm talking about on the energy side. Electricity is today quite expensive, but it's not the production of the energy that makes it expensive. It's a grid, it's some taxes, it's fees, and so on and so on. I can show this later on if you want to. And so the question is, the economics for every kind of use of these trains will be in every country different. So that makes it interesting to have Hydrail chances outside of Germany. So areas without any electrified tracks, like in Canada, or very low, like in New Zealand, who managed to have 2 or 3 different kind of traction systems within a very small country and very small railway network. And you have, of course, areas with cheaper wind and solar energy, just like Germany is especially the north of Germany is a bit rainy, and but we have wind, but there are quite countries where you have lots of more wind and solar energy. So the Hydrail's future is going to be the export, not the use in Germany. That's my prediction on this, because the electrification and catenary systems are quite far in Central Europe. But in other countries, we don't see this. At the end of the day, Hydrail will have a good future in the world, but maybe not that much in Germany.
Thank you, Holger. Now let's see what questions do we have. So we'll go and take some questions, but before, just a reminder, please type your questions to the live chat or send them directly to info@energynews.biz. And it looks like we have quite a few questions. Here's the first one. How will Hydrail develop in 10 years in Germany? Your expectations?
Okay, how will Hydrail develop in Germany? I'm pretty sure there will be some lines added on this technology, because some lines are longer than the 80 kilometers you can cope with the rechargeable battery. And the electrification is a process that has to go through some kind of evaluation process, and of course you get the allowance to electrify the tracks, which takes several years just to be allowed to do so, and then it takes some years to install the electrification system. So it might be cheaper and easier on these long run tracks to install the hydrogen system. But I see, you see, 60% of the tracks are already electrified, and I'm pretty sure no more than 10 or 15%, that's a guess, of course, will be on Hydrail, because most of the tracks will be reachable by rechargeable batteries or will be electrified later on. And of course, it has to be mentioned that the 60% of electrified tracks covers more than 85% of the traffic, because of course the heavy used lines are the ones who are electrified.
Next question. From a policy and regulatory standpoint, what measures are necessary to support the growth of Hydrail both in Germany and internationally?
Well, Hydrail is in operation, so the regulations is allowing these kind of trains. So it's not that much of a problem to being allowed to run a Hydrail train. The regulations that has to be made and improved if you want to support Hydrail is the production of hydrogen. And that's basically the cost of electricity. And that's basically, again, the availability of wind and solar energy. And at the end of the day, this will be in all countries the case. Of course, in other countries, you might have still the problem of regulations on the track side to being allowed to operate Hydrail trains. But as there's an example in Germany already, other railway companies or railway regulators will be able to do so. And Germany is not the only one. Austria is also coming up with the with a certain valley, I can't remember the name in a moment, that will have Hydrail trains from Stadler. And of course, so it's coming up sooner or later. More and more countries will have hydrogen trains. China came up with a tram system that is operating on hydraulic, I think it's called then, hydrogen trolley. And so the regulations problem will be solved. The question is, do you get your energy?
What are the key challenges associated with Hydrail, and how can they be addressed to accelerate the adoption?
I'm not 100% sure if I got this right, but I would say the most important question is the pricing of the energy. It's at the end of the day, it's coming up to the same question: how long will diesel fuel, for example, be so cheap that you not include the cost of climate change and climate crisis? So as soon as you would include those costs into the diesel price, you will see up that Hydrail is popping up quite very fast, because it's much cheaper. For example, if you take Scotland, where you have lots of wind, and if the diesel train became too expensive, and you can easily install wind turbines over there, which, because the electric grid is too far away, then it might be even cheaper if the train company buys some wind turbines or solar fields, an own electricity system, an own electrolyzer and Hydrail trains, and you just get your own things everywhere. Then you get out of a lot of regulations due to the electrical grid, which you usually have, which you are facing. So I've got another picture, if I'm allowed to show this.
Yes.
Share the screen again, where you can see, which is a bit older picture, but it doesn't matter. It shows at the end of the day that 3/4 of the electricity price, I forgot to put it on F5, and see this. So 3/4 of the price of the electricity at that time, which is older, but it's tax, sharing costs, which is a grid, for example, and so on. Another fee and fee and fee. So you see, only 7 cents per kilowatt hour of the pricing is the real cost of energy at that time, which is 2015, where we didn't have that much of renewable energy, which is much cheaper. So at the end of the day, these pricing will be very cheap. And if you come back to that again for a moment, so sorry for the shift, but this is also most important thing, because if you are able to use these, oops, that's a song, right? If you are able to use the low pricing parts of the costs of the energy, then you are able to produce your hydrogen even cheaper than that. Just a moment, I explain this. By the way, these are the vintage rail cars I was talking about. So made out of 59 and 61. The problem is that in the production of wind, solar, or whatever, is producing at a time when you don't need it. So if you have a catenary system, you always need the power in the moment the train starts. And with hydrogen, you always can jump into the cheap areas of production. Getting much cheaper electricity, because you can sell the electricity at the moment when it's not needed at higher prices to the grid. So somehow some kind of benefiting from higher prices in the grid to reduce your cost of producing hydrogen.
That was very insightful. Next question: how does CAPEX, investment in Hydrail, compare to other decarbonization options in the transportation sector?
In the transportation sector at all? Yes, the CAPEX on the train is not that much in comparison to CAPEX which you would install into a truck or a car. So especially if you see a car costs about, say, 50,000, and just a small rail car costs you 5 million. So 100 times. But this hydrogen system is not 100 times the price of the hydrogen system in a car. Sure, trains are here in a big advantage in comparison to whatever, especially cars.
Are there specific regions or contexts where Hydrail makes more sense than alternative low-carbon rail solutions? Why or why not?
As I showed with the range picture, so the different kind of decarbonization processes or chances is given by the range. So if you have no catenary system available, there is a certain distance which you can cope with the rechargeable batteries. Later on this, you will face the problem that you're only transporting the battery anymore. If you try to operate, for example, these large freight trains in the States, you will find out that your engine will only transport just batteries because it's too heavy. Then the hydrogen will pop in, especially with the development, and that's most important on that, with the development of liquid organic hydrogen carriers, you will solve quite a lot of problems on the technical sides for the storage volume that you need for hydrogen. So hydrogen is high energy density per kilogram, but very, 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 very low energy density per cubic meter. So you have to compress this up to 70 megapascal, which converts to 700 bars if you calculate it on this basis. Or you have to make it liquid, which needs 1/3 of the energy content of the hydrogen. So you have to freeze it almost to 253 degrees centigrade minus. Which makes it quite difficult to handle. These liquid organic hydrogen carriers have a good chance to be a system changer in this, because they can be handled in normal pressure and normal temperatures, just like a normal liquid. You fill in your liquid hydrogen, your LOHC, extract the hydrogen. You have some kind of an oil, which is used usually for cooling transformer stations, and the LOHC remains, and later on you charge it again with hydrogen. So this LOHC is about 1/3 of the energy density in means of volume of diesel. So imagine if you just have to increase a diesel tank in a locomotive, that can be easily done, especially as the fuel cell and all the other components of that engine will be smaller than the diesel engine of a 3 megawatt diesel power engine. So the range is 80 kilometers for the rechargeable batteries by now. It might be a bit more than later on, but if you go beyond this, well, you have no chance for the batteries.
Okay, and next one, I think you already partially answered this, but what are the critical policy and infrastructure requirements needed to create an enabling environment for the widespread deployment of Hydrail?
In the beginning, if you are in Germany, for example, if in the beginning, if you have an authority that wants to hire local traffic, which is usually hired by the local authority, so it's just like the province of Schleswig-Holstein, or even if you look into other provinces in Germany, you have some kind of regional developers, authorities that order train traffic. So if you get them to order Hydrail instead of diesel, for example, then you've got the first step done already, because you're making up the market. You have somebody who's buying that stuff. That helps quite a lot. Again, if you are not in these conditions where you have somebody who is hiring local traffic, you just have to be self-sufficient, then it's needed to have the energy side on a way that hydrogen is becoming cheaper than everything else, especially diesel fuel. And which is easily possible if you include the climate crisis costs into the diesel.
How would you describe the current technology's level of maturity, and is there a room for greater efficiencies?
There's always ways to do something better. But the thing is, especially engineers are quite often calculating 3 digits beyond the decimal point, without looking too much on the decimal points before that, the digits before that decimal points. So the point is, yes, there is chances to get it better. You have big chances to increase efficiency if you use the heat of the electrolyzer, for example, to heat for space heating, or even swimming pool or whatever, or in industry to have the industrial heat that you need derived from the electrolyzers. Then you already decrease the energy that you need on that side. If the regulations, and that's back to the regulations, enable these kind of co-use of different kind of electricity use, then you're on the good side already.
And the last question, how much kilograms of hydrogen cylinder capacity in Hydrail and the pressure? This is literally the question, but I hope you understand it.
Yes, I just swap back to that presentation where we can see the values that of the very first island that has been published. Just a moment. By the way, on the backside you see New Zealand. I'm not sure. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, sorry for the confusion. So now you can see it. The question was how much is the capacity of the
hydrogen cylinder capacity.
Yes, I don't know how many cylinders are installed, but at the end of the day, you see they're calculating with 0.15 or 0.2 kilogram hydrogen per kilometers, and they're trying to keep a range of 1,000 kilometers. So we're talking about 150 to 200 kilograms, obviously. That has to be installed. I don't know how many cylinders each train has, but at the end of the day, we're talking about 150 kilograms for such a rail car. Of course, you can put a train set out of more than these. You can couple up to 4 of them, for example, to have a 200 meters long train that reach, of course, then almost a ton of hydrogen.
Great, thank you. Now we have covered all of our questions. So, Holger, is there anything else you would like to cover before we wrap it up?
No more topics, but I'm glad about these questions. Thank you very much, and get it out there, because we definitely need the change away from the fossil fuels and the nuclear fuels, because we need wind and solar energy in all of the industry and transportation modes. And of course, at the end of the day, trains are better than cars and trucks.
Great. Thank you, Holger, and thank you, everyone. We appreciate you being here today with us. Please be aware that Energy News Biz will be active this summer with interviews and webinars, so stay tuned for the latest and greatest news from hydrogen industry. Thanks again for joining us today, and we will see you in the next one.